Our next interview is with Kevin Johnson of Royal Books, and Kevin is from the Baltimore area. And Kevin, give us a little bit of a background on yourself, where you were born, brought up, education, family. Take us up to the threshold before you wanted to become a bookseller. Who were you and what did you do?
Well, I was raised in Arkansas, first in the northwest part of Arkansas and then in Little Rock. And I always had a big interest in the arts. And in the 60s and the 70s, the only way to have access to the arts in Arkansas was mail order. I mail ordered records. I did from guys in New York and stamps guys in Canada. And everything was by mail order. There weren't any shops. There was no connection to the outside world. So I always wanted to get out and live in the city and be a culture vulture. I wound up going to Vanderbilt University in Nashville, where I got much more of a taste of the city. And then I graduated and worked for the government for about 15 years. And all during that time, I was always haunting bookstores and, one of those guys who just hung around in bookstores, hanging around and reading, shredding books all the time. But I never thought too much about first editions. And it wasn't until about the mid-'90s I was working for the government, and a colleague of mine who is actually now a bookseller also came up to me and looked at the book I was reading, and he said, that guy's very collectible and you should get a first edition. And I said, what's a first edition? I sort of knew. I sort of had a vague idea, but I didn't really, I didn't quite know what he meant. And by 24 hours later, the virus had completely been released, and it was all over. And about a year later, I took a sabbatical, and a year after that, I resigned. And I still remember my accountant saying to me, that the best part of your retirement money is in the last half of your career, right? You're going to leave that to sell books. And I said, yeah. And so that's how I got into it. I started out selling privately, I tried eBay for about 5 minutes, and that didn't work too much for me. I liked retail better, and got involved in ABE in its infancy. And I came from a computer background, so that was helpful. And I wasn't actually burdened by having to transition to the computer world. That's how I started. So the challenge for me was actually learning more about old-fashioned bookselling and, and the way that it used to be done and the extreme advantages of that, especially with rare books, and learning how to talk to people and get to know customers and other dealers and relationships. So I sold privately out of a fourth floor of a chemical factory for about 5 years, and then I was very lucky and got an offer to buy at a very attractive price an existing bookstore in Baltimore. And that was offered to me by the Kelmscott Bookshop, and I bought the shop on the right, which turned out to be maybe the best decision I ever made, far better than any book buying decision, because I won't ever have to move, and I get to keep my books where they are. And today we have an open store and catalog business and staff of 7 people, and hopefully I don't want it to get any bigger than that. And we have a lot of fun.
What percentage of your business comes from internet service versus, I know you do a lot of things on film, and your film catalog is great, but what percentages come from the internet and what percentage come from like the shop and catalogs and book fairs?
Well, our color catalog is where we put all of our most expensive books and our rarest titles, and that's definitely the engine of commerce. That's what keeps the store open. Yeah. But I find that these days that it all kind of works together. There is internet sales, and we sell inexpensive books on the internet every day, $15, $20, $30 books. But people are, since our window to the world is our website, and to a certain extent ABE, but really more and more our website. That's the way people see us. And so I find frequently that I'm talking to someone at a fair or I'm talking to them on the phone or whatever, that their perspective on me has been largely informed by what they've seen on the website. And they look for our new arrivals there and everything else. It's become such a big part of the way people see each other in the world with iPhones and computers and everything else. And it isn't everything. To me, it's just like the fax machine or the phone. It's just another way that people communicate with one another. But there are pictures, and it's very fast. And so it's all kind of a piece. But in the end, speaking on the phone is just so necessary, especially for an expensive book, because the more expensive it is and rare it is, and the more issues there are, and the more someone's going to want to hear a person on the other end of the line to sort of assure them or tell them that they're getting what they're paying for and that they have the right to return it and all that. So I just find that it all kind of like is synergistic, you know.
When you started in the trade, who were some of the mentors or people that you would go to for advice? Or were you so good that you didn't need it?
Oh, no. I to this day, I look at it as a big continuum. And, I was in my late 30s, early 40s, and I was referred to as a youngster. Actually, I'm still referred to as a youngster. I'm 48. But when I first got started, I scouted for Teresa Johansson, who had run the Kelmscott Bookshop for many years, and she taught me a lot. She was a great business person and always just extremely honest and never, just a straight shooter all the way. And back even when I had no prospects and no reason for her to do anything at all like that, she always educated and told me when to say no and when to say yes and when I was making a mistake. And she was really good. And a little later on, Tom Congleton was a big help, and I had a strong interest in modern firsts, and so Tom kind of took me under his wing and helped me introduce me to a lot of people in the ABAA and get me into the help encourage me to get into the ABAA. Peter Stern certainly, and Jeff Marks, all the modern firsts, Mafia on the East Coast,
sure.
all those guys. I mean, you can't argue with experience, and they had a lot of experience, and they were always very generous.
There are aspects of the book business that are constantly changing, and since the internet revolution, so to speak, what do you see as some of the issues that we're going to be facing, some of the challenges that we're going to be facing as an association moving forward?
Well, I have to say there was a period of time, maybe about 5 years ago, when it seemed like there was a lot of concern that there weren't enough young people coming into the ABAA.
Right.
But looking around, at least in my field, there's a whole generation of young people now turning up, younger than me, 10 years younger than me, getting into the trade, and very impressive people, very smart, it seems like about the same kind of wave that was happening, when I first got started, and the guys who were in my class, so to speak. I think that the ABA is still very strong, and the mark of quality has survived. And like any organization, we have to fight against criticism and the perception that we're holier than thou, and those kinds of things. And but I think that you can't argue with good tradesmanship and honesty and integrity, and I think that all those things are really important to the organization. And sometimes the organization has proven that by letting go of members that who were problematic in that regard, and I think that's a painful part of having to maintain a standard. But I think it's going to become even more important because the world is moving faster and faster and faster, and when things move too fast, people get a bad deal sometimes. And to have a place where they know they can go, I just think it can only become more important.
You are currently on the faculty of the Colorado Book Seminar. You want to talk a little bit about the seminar, how you view its importance, how you see it going forward in the future? I think it's a major thing as an adjunct to our trade.
Yeah, I love it. One thing I don't like is politics, and so I sort of, at one point when I had an opportunity to get involved with the seminar, the way I viewed it was that I could either get involved in ABA politics or I could get involved with the seminar and give back to the university, either one way or the other. And when it comes to dealing with lots of opinions, and booksellers are certainly opinionated, I just had no desire to get into the political end, although I might decide to be a treasurer or something at some point.
Something esoteric.
Something really on the fringe. But I really liked the idea of teaching a lot, even though I had no experience as a teacher. And thanks to the patience of the faculty, I think I'm going into my third year there. It's been a great experience, and we find every year that there's just a big room full of super excited students in every area, from antiquarian books to modern books to eBay, you name it, who want to learn more about being a professional. So
do you see it as being able to continue into the future, Kevin, with the way things are in the world?
Well, I think it's such a hands-on business that I think the smarter people realize that you have to have a hands-on experience to learn. So I don't think that it's something that you couldn't possibly compete with an online course. It's just not possible.
Right.
You need to be able to converse and ask questions and propose situations. It's all so there's so much gray area to cover that I think that the smarter folks realize that that's important. And so many people who have gone on to be good booksellers went to the seminar when they first got started. I wish I had. I didn't find out about it until much later.
We have several members of our association who are graduates.
Oh yeah, many. I talk to people all the time and surprised to find that they went in the 70s or the 80s. Yeah, absolutely. But I think it's always a challenge to advertise, and we find that the best advertisement for the seminar is past seminarians and word of mouth, and just getting the word out that it exists and that it's good and that it's worth a week of your time in Colorado Springs. But it's great.
Yeah, and the cost of it is relatively small in comparison to the amount of information that students are getting.
Yeah, it costs about a quarter of what it would cost to go to a normal seminar these days, of the same caliber. So I think it's not a money-making enterprise. It's not for profit, So I think it's a bargain and absolutely necessary. I would have done it in a heartbeat when I first got started if I had only known. So.
Well, in the old days, we used to have 100 to 110 people come to the seminar, and we had a waiting list. And over the years, as it's gone, it's sort of like going on each year a little bit lower. And then we went up, then we went down.
Right.
I personally think it's a terrific adjunct to our trade because it introduces young people to the book business, which is something they probably wanted to get into, but they wouldn't be there if they weren't.
Well, I think one of the reasons, if I were to say something that I think is a real challenge, I think it's that in these days, it seems like every year things are moving faster and faster and faster, and the idea of taking a week to stop what you're doing and learn is asking a lot. I mean, even taking a day to do that, because a bookseller who's getting started is saying, well, no, I can't abandon my online business for a week, I'd lose all this money and all these opportunities. And so it's sort of a matter of slowing down and realizing what the benefit might be and having a leap of faith,
Yeah. Let's see. If you were entering the book business today, you suddenly come up to a bookseller, so you go to Tom Congleton and say, Tom, I've decided I'd like to be in the book business. What advice would you give me? What advice would you give to someone who asked you that question?
Wow, I wouldn't really know where to start. Be careful. If you're going to be involved with rare books, you might want to be careful about... I feel like that the rare book world and the used book world are really, really diverging. I mean, when I first got started, the idea of like walking into a shop where there was the used books and then there's the rare book room, that was common, but I think those days are coming to an end, because I think that the used books, the only reason they existed really was so that people could read them, and now there are going to be so many more options for doing that, so the rare book market is just a completely different, it's almost like apples and oranges. You're dealing with two different kinds of people, collectors and readers. And not that collectors are not readers, they almost always are, fanatical readers. But so I would say that I actually have gotten a chance to talk to some people who are coming up in the trade, and they've asked me that question, and that's one of the first things I say. If you're going to get involved with rare books, only got this much money, be really careful what you spend it on, and be thoughtful about, like, if you take in 5,000 books for not much money, well, that looks exciting, but it's going to take you a long time to catalog all those books, and you could be doing other things and spending your money different ways. So.
That's so true. Talk a little bit about some of the things that you found as you were approaching in the book world. You started and you bought the shop next door to Kelmscott, and you became a bookseller. You have 7 employees, etc. What are some of the things that you recall as a younger bookseller starting out with this shop? What were some of the problems that you encountered? What were some of the good things that happened because of it?
Well, one of the great things about having an open shop, and we aren't in a real heavily trafficked area, but we have, several people through the shop every day, all kinds of people. And a lot of times you'll have a situation where someone will walk in, well, my 2